ultimately, we are champions for the Solana ecosystem, and one of the ways we describe the business is that we want to bring TradFi capital into DeFi and DeFi returns into TradFi.
Part of the reason why we back these guys is also they're very mission driven. They want to promote the Solana story. We want to promote the Solana story, and so that alignment is great.
All right, we're here with the COO of DFDV, Parker White. Good to see you, man. Along with Cosmo Jiang, Pantera general partner, and this is an interesting conversation. It's one that I think maybe a lot of people out there don't even know is possible, but you guys are a publicly traded company kind of replicating the Michael Saylor Bitcoin strategy playbook, but using Solana. And I guess we want to start with, where did it come from? Where did that idea come from?
That is a good question. So I come from kind of the Bitcoin community, kind of an Austrian economics kind of background. And so of all the crypto projects out there, Bitcoin made the most sense early on, back in 2017, 2018 when I was getting in. And so for a long time, I was like right on the border of Bitcoin maximalism. Then actually I'm going to give him a shout out here, Ryan Gentry. He, over at Lightning Labs, he wrote the thesis paper on Solana at Multicoin. Mm-hmm. So he showed me on Solana a little, heretically, like, hey man, there's this other thing. And so I started getting into Solana, and kind of been in Solana since early 2021. Just dabbling around doing stuff, DeFi stuff. And so following, of course, what Saylor's been doing with MicroStrategy on the Bitcoin side, but then also being, a quiet Solana bull. Started running a Solana validator about a year and a half ago, and then kind of a chance discussion with Joseph. We were just kind of jamming on some ideas. I kind of shared a 2-page kind of strategy doc idea, some random thoughts, many of which are not part of our business strategy anymore, but regardless, Joseph was hooked. And so that discussion was had on a Thursday, and by Sunday night, I think it was, Joseph was like, hey, I know this guy, Blake Janover, he's got a company. And so that was the beginning, and it was 81 days after that conversation, or I think 83 days after that conversation, we announced a change of control. And so it was a whirlwind to get to that moment, but the stars aligned. Cosmo here backed us, and huge blessing, huge great thing to have supporters like that behind us.
In backing an idea like that, Cosmo, obviously we've seen how it's played out for Saylor and what he's done with Bitcoin. Explain to me what you saw in terms of running it back for Solana.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think starting with my background, I come from traditional equities. I'm a fundamental value investor, blue-blooded. When I look at MicroStrategy, a lot of people ask, why should it trade at 2 times NAV? That seems crazy. It should trade at 1 times. And that's what I've thought for the longest time. But as investors, it's so important that you constantly re-examine your assumptions, especially in light of contrary data, which in the case of MicroStrategy, which is this guy's been trading at 2x NAV or 2x premium for a very long time. It's persistent, and it's persisted post-ETF when everyone thought it would collapse. So sort of holding reality lightly, as they say, I was like, okay, so there's something going on here. And as I realized that there are actually key ingredients that make this work, right? And it's really 3. One is that you have to believe these 3 things. One is you have to believe that markets are irrational sometimes. I think everyone can agree markets are sometimes irrational. Sometimes things don't trade at fair value. Yeah. So number 1, you have to believe that. 2, you have to believe that there's always going to be volatility in the market. And then 3, you have to believe that there is a management team that knows how to take advantage of those circumstances, that situation, to create value for their shareholders by using really sophisticated financial engineering tools. And in that way, you actually have seen that now there are serious fundamental value guys like Capital Group, the largest mutual fund in the US, Norges, the Swedish sovereign wealth fund. They own MicroStrategy in size because they came to the realization that this is actually, if you have all those ingredients, you can own Bitcoin in a much smarter way. If you're buying MicroStrategy at 2 times, you're getting half a Bitcoin. But if MicroStrategy can do all these things to grow their Bitcoin per share at a fast rate, then in a couple years, you actually have more than 1 Bitcoin, you're more than break even. Mm-hmm. And so I totally started to understand the circumstances that make this possible. And so I was like, okay, I can believe this. Number 2 is then you have to believe, why Solana, right? And to me, it became immediately obvious that was the next best asset. As many people know, I'm a very vocal Solana bull. It's become one of our second largest position at Pantera, only behind Bitcoin. And we are extremely excited about the growth prospects that we see there. As we talk to institutional investors, which I spend a lot of my time doing, it's like you'll talk to the PWM group or the private wealth management group at Citi, and they'll say, 95% of my conversations about crypto are about Bitcoin. But the next most mentioned coin is Solana. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. So there's this real demand for it. And so there's this demand for it. Solana, I think, has real fundamental value and reasons to grow. And so I really believe Solana as an asset. So I believe the MicroStrategy thesis, I believe Solana, and then you have to find the right team. And this team was amazing. Like, they had the capital markets specificity of knowledge. I think that a lot of that is lacking with a lot of crypto teams, unsurprisingly, but these guys knew how to execute. They had a very clear marketing plan, very clear capital markets go-to-market plan, and so that's just all that together bubbled up into a long-winded answer.
Well, I mean, it's a long-winded answer, but it's a true answer.
It's quite the pitch. Man, I'm ready to buy.
Well, I mean, in terms of 83 days, it's not a very long time, but if you look at the chart already, and I think it is kind of fun to think about publicly traded companies, throwing treasuries into this, at least from seeing the reaction, and it's been pretty crazy, in the up direction, which is normally what people want when they're shareholders. But I think, would we also all agree that it's a different component, right? In terms of Solana being different than Bitcoin, I think that's where everyone kind of came into the ecosystem, is understanding the fundamentals of Bitcoin. Solana is built differently in terms of the tokenomics. So what does that require from you, Parker, in terms of, I guess, getting it right? What kind of numbers are you looking at? What's the analysis that goes into kind of like, okay, Bitcoin has its halving cycle. How do you kind of try and build what you're doing around what's unique to Solana?
Yeah, so I think the cool thing about Solana is, put very simply, there's just more you can do with it, right? It's a productive asset. Bitcoin's great, love Bitcoin. Personally, I hold a lot of Bitcoin as well. But it kind of just sits there, right? Store value, like that is the thing that it does. It sits. And that's what you want it to do. But on the Solana side, it's a very productive asset. It is the economic security for the internet capital markets, right? The future of global value transfer of all different types imaginable. And so because it's this economic anchor, there's a lot of things that you can do with it around generating yield, validators. We talked about restaking earlier with the Fragmetric team. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do with said asset to optimize your holdings and to grow your stack more quickly. And so when you think about the MicroStrategy playbook, actually what we did is we took their playbook and then we added a giant, I'd call it like a 2/3 additional stack to said playbook. And that's just due to the nature of the asset. There's a lot more that you can do with it. In my view, I guess I'm talking my own book here, but I think that actually places more importance on the management team to be able to execute, because there is such a wider range of options available. It's it's MicroStrategy plus, and so that's a great opportunity set in front of you to do a whole bunch of things. Again, talking my own book here, but I like to think our team was kind of purpose built for this, where we spent a number of years in crypto. Joseph, our CEO, was the CEO of the first Canadian Bitcoin exchange back in 2013. I got in far later, back in 2017. But then pretty much everyone on the team comes from the buy side. So I spent a number of years doing some bond trading, got my CFA during that time. Our CFO, John, also has a CFA. One of the guys on the team, background at Jefferies, another guy on the team, background at Morgan. And so like a lot of that TradFi experience and then a number of years in crypto, bringing that together, I think creates a cool, magical combination.
Yeah, and Cosmo, your background's in traditional finance as well. I think one of the things, just kind of talking the playbook being mirrored over, is also just the size of what you guys are doing right now in terms of how it builds on itself. Because if you think about the size of Solana's market cap, it's far smaller, obviously, than Bitcoin's. And so what you're doing is much more impactful to the Solana price as well. It's almost like, I think, equivalent of, $2.5 billion of buys in terms of the last one I think you guys made, if you adjusted it over to Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know. You're the numbers guy here, Cosmo. You tell me if I'm off on those and kind of how it works from like the size of Solana right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's exactly the right analogy. When I think about it as an investor, what I'm trying to find is big open growth stories and like how big can this get if it succeeds. And so you look at Bitcoin today, 2 trillion market cap, you look at MicroStrategy, $100 billion market cap, and so call it 5%, right, of Bitcoin. Well, if you translate that over to Solana, Solana's 100 billion, 5% of that's 5 billion. That sounds like a pretty big TAM to me. We put in what is a sizable check into getting this off the ground. I wanted to make a real high conviction bet here. And we started at, call it $50 million of capital, and 50 to 5 billion is a pretty smooth path if we can execute along that. And these guys have killed it over the last few weeks since we've gone live. And so we're really happy about that.
What are the checkpoints too, though, in terms of, I think with what Saylor has done, his conviction has been sold to the market, the idea that he's never going to sell his Bitcoin, the idea of kind of, him being there. At some point, you have a lot of Bitcoin people kind of talking about, I don't know if that's great, I don't know if it's bad, I don't know if it's good. I mean, how do you kind of see yourself fitting into the Solana ecosystem, and kind of, do you want to be the Michael Saylor of Solana?
Yeah, I mean, we think about it a little bit differently in that it's more of a team approach. But ultimately, we are champions for the Solana ecosystem. And one of the ways we describe the business is that we want to bring TradFi capital into DeFi and DeFi returns into TradFi. So we serve this bridge. And actually, if you look at our logo, it's a bridge, right? And that's by design. And so, what we found along the way is we end up getting into a lot of these investor conversations. And they're like, okay, what are you guys? And we're like, hey, we're the fastest way to accumulate Solana. And they're like, cool, so tell me about Solana, right? And so then we spend most of the conversation talking about Solana. We're getting into rooms with investors, and we are the first or maybe the second person that's really spent more than 10 minutes talking to them about Solana. And so our hope is that over time, hey, it's great and easy. You can just buy the stock in your prime brokerage account and get a little position, get a little skin in the game. But then once you have some skin in the game, as everybody knows that's bought any coins, you start to go down the rabbit hole, right? And so our hope is that over time, these investors, they get a little exposure through DFDV, and then they start to go down the rabbit hole. Maybe they start to do some trading on chain, making some markets, providing some liquidity. Maybe they get into RWAs on chain. There's like a whole giant world out there. And my view, it's more expansive than the TradFi markets, and just in terms of what you can do. And so we want to kind of be this bridge, this conduit to bring people from TradFi into DeFi by giving them an instrument that they know and love, a stock that they can buy.
Last question too, Cosmo, in terms of, I guess, what we talked about last time was so many institutional investors being interested in Solana after Bitcoin, but before Ethereum, in terms of kind of what you've seen recently. And you mentioned the ETF potentially coming, we don't know when, but whenever it will come for Solana. How do you see kind of, this fitting into interest around the ETF, because it doesn't include, I think, a lot of what Parker just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, look, to speak about Solana, there's just so many, I think, positive catalysts that are still yet to come. There's clearly this untapped demand for Solana, as we've seen with the excitement about DFDV. I do think when the ETF launches, and it is a when, I don't think an if, this year, that we'll see really strong action there. And more importantly, it's a coming out moment, right, for Solana. It really makes it be out on the main stage. I think DFDV is doing a great job of this too. But it's really important that we're evangelizing the fact that this is a very strong blockchain that people believe in. That's very interesting as an investment, but also very interesting as a place to develop and build on. And so, part of the reason why we back these guys is also they're very mission driven. They want to promote the Solana story. We want to promote the Solana story, and so that alignment is great.
Right on. Well, I think again, there aren't a lot of projects who have gone from idea to execution in 83 days and now doing it as a publicly traded company, but exciting to see, and we'll see it all play out. Cosmo, thank you for your time. Parker, appreciate it as always. Thanks, guys.